If there's one thing playing the Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game for over 20 years has taught me, it's that you can't just look at a card's benefits, upside, and ceiling when trying to determine how successful a card is going to be in the competitive metagame. When cards are first revealed, we as duelists naturally analyze them and try to figure out how good they are. Generally speaking, the more powerful and stacked the card is, the better. But power and good effects often tend to make us overlook other vital aspects that can determine a card's success, like ease of use and fit in the metagame. This actually happens all the time in the world of sports with talent evaluators. They fall in love with prospects for their physical gifts and often overlook their unseen intangibles, which are equally as important. Today's video is a prime example of that, all about a wildly popular monster that's actually fairly iconic among Yu-Gi-Oh anime fans. This monster had the stats of a god, power in spades, and was released at the height of its theme's greatness. Yet despite all this, could never really put it together and break through on the competitive level. Today's video is all about the monstrous Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon, one of the most powerful cards in Yu-Gi-Oh that no one ever played. Per usual, I'll cover the card, why players instantly fell in love with it, and lastly, why it failed to make its mark on the metagame. 2016 was one of the biggest batches of nostalgia we've ever seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! A core booster set centered around Blue Eyes and Shining Victories released in May, followed by a core booster set centered around Dark Magician with the Dark Illusion that dropped in August. In between those, Konami also debuted a full-length Yu-Gi-Oh film, The Dark Side of Dimensions, as well as a movie pack in July that of course featured new cards from the film itself. Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon was released in the TCG in this very set. We had known about Chaos Dragon since about April when it was first revealed. Also, Seto Kaiba did summon it in the Dark Side of Dimensions movie. Most Yu-Gi tubers and members of the community agreed the card was incredibly powerful. In fact, I feel like I might be underselling it a bit, as Chaos Max was a level 8 Dragon Ritual. Oddly enough, for a Blue Eyes card, it was Dark Attribute, with an astounding 4,000 attack. Yes, you heard me correctly, 4,000 attack on a level 8 Ritual. I know this is going back over a dozen years prior to this, but to put things into perspective, level 8 ritual monsters before Chaos Max topped out with DM anime cards like Noah Kaiba's Shinato King of a Higher Plane at 3,300, or Loomis and Umbra's The Masked Beast at 3,200 respectively. In terms of raw attack value, Blue Eyes Chaos Max put those cards to shame, and fun fact, to this day, is still the highest attack ritual monster in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, full disclosure, Chaos Max is tied with 3 other monsters, but for the record, those cards are all 4 levels higher than it, which just kinda goes to show how out of whack putting 4,000 attack on a level 8 ritual monster was. The Chaos Dragon's attack value was super important, but its effects were also out of this world. Chaos Max had full-on Magispector protection, meaning it couldn't be targeted or destroyed by any of your opponent's card effects. Now that level of protection on Magispector monsters was solid, but not overwhelming because of the archetype's tendency to have relatively low attack values. However, put those effects on a boss monster meant to dish out big damage, and it could be lethal. See Red Eyes Dark Dragoon or my beloved Luna Light Leo Dancer. In addition to all of that, Chaos Max had one more trick up its sleeve, and it was truly horrifying. A completely brand new effect never seen in the game, double piercing damage. It's exactly what it sounds like, and when I first read it, I couldn't even believe that it was a thing, especially on a 4,000 attack monster. Double piercing damage on Chaos Max meant setting cards against this behemoth was pretty much always a no-go, and Max could OTK your opponent even with monsters in what is supposed to be their most defensive and protected position. If you ever caught your opponent with a 0 defense monster in defense mode, like a GOAT token for example, well, it was lights out for them. Being a ritual monster and a Blue Eyes card specifically, Chaos Max was easily summoned off the always powerful Advanced Ritual art, which synergized perfectly since the original Blue Eyes White Dragon was a level 8 normal monster. However, Chaos Max also was released alongside its own ritual spell, Chaos Form. Chaos Form honestly wasn't anything special. It was a pretty standard ritual spell that allowed you to banish a Blue Eyes White Dragon from your graveyard to make the full ritual payment. Outside of that, it was also named on the dragon itself, so technically it opened up the potential to run the newly released at the time pre-preparation of rights to get both cards simultaneously. Thanks to new support, the Pure Blue Eyes deck plowed through challengers like Magispectors and PK Fire to claim the 2016 Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship via a mirror match. But there was no sight of Blue Eyes Chaos Max in those builds. While Chaos Max would have been an incredibly difficult card to out for the top 3 decks of the World's Tournament meta, there was a ton of Anti-Spell Fragrance and Mask of Restrict, both of which could be crippling to Ritual decks. Players were even citing Santa Claus since the Kaijus weren't legal at that event, which of course deals with the Chaos Max that's already on the field. As stated earlier, Chaos Max and the movie pack were released in late July, which generally speaking is about the worst time of the year for new cards to come out. That's because pre-pandemic, July and August usually only feature a couple of large tournaments like the European Championship and Worlds, one being only about 25 players and the other exclusively for European duelists. After that, there's usually a short dry period where there aren't many YCS level events. Luckily, 2016 was a bit of an anomaly. YCS Toronto, Canada took place in late August and, to no one's surprise, was heavily dominated by Monarchs and Phantom Knight Burning Abyss, aka PK Fire. The world's ban list was not in effect to aid Blue Eyes here, and the upcoming September 2016 TCG ban list wouldn't go into effect until one day after the event. While the Pure Blue Eyes build did top, honestly, Chaos Max Dragon wasn't suited for the Monarch matchup. Not only could Monarchs easily deal with it by using Erebus, which was non-targeting removal, but they could also use Vanity's Fiend to stop it from ever hitting the field completely. Post that ban list was a different story, however. With Pantheism, Stormforth, and Aether going to limited status, Monarchs fell out of the meta. Sadly, while this translated fantastically for the Blue Eyes deck, it didn't do much for Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon the card. And while most would argue that Chaos Max was insanely powerful, it was also an incredibly linear card that required you to commit heavily to it when deck building. You couldn't simply throw in a single copy of Chaos Form and Chaos Max into a meta Blue Eyes build and expect it to work. How would you ever get both at the same time to use them? Sure, you could add pre-preparation to search both cards, but to do so effectively, you probably have to add multiple copies of all the cards. Doing all of that sounded like a lot of work and potentially inconsistent. Players argued that the Chaos Max builds were significantly worse than the Pure, and because of commonly played side deck cards like the Kaijus, they were right. There was no disputing that Max builds had higher ceilings, but they also had way lower floors. Imagine if you summoned Chaos Max going first just to have it get Kaiju'd. You were almost certainly going to lose against any competent competitive player. Blue Eyes actually had a stellar showing at the first YCS of the new September 2016 format held in Mexico City, where it made it to the finals and 2 Pure Blue Eyes builds made top 4. But again, between common side deck cards like Kaijus and Anti-Spell Fragrance, which put in big work versus metafoes, players were just too unwilling to commit to the Titan. There were simply too many roadblocks for Chaos Max to succeed. YCS Minneapolis was another prime example of this. Blue Eyes actually led all meta decks with 8 players in the top 32 using the strategy, but as you guessed, there were 0 who used Chaos Max Dragon itself. There was the smallest flash in the pan sign of success for Chaos Max builds though, and it actually occurred at a couple of regionals during the days of Zoodiac dominance. Post Maximum Crisis, Zoodiac were still the dominant deck, with True Draco playing second fiddle and combinations of the 2 archetypes often being splashed together in a single deck. Believe it or not, in theory, this specific meta wasn't actually all that bad for Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon. Just think about it. During the days of Draco and Zoo, destruction was king. Torrential Tribute, Zoodiac Trident, Masterpiece, the Draco Traps, etc, etc. Well, guess what 4000 attack Walking Island was completely unaffected by all these cards. In addition, floodgates like Anti-Spell Fragrance and the newly unbanned Imperial Order weren't all that popular because of how easily they were outed by Trident, the Draco spells, Masterpiece, and more. Were there still major hurdles like Dimensional Barrier, which could call Ritual, and the Kaijus? Yeah, but I'd still argue those aside, Blue Eyes Chaos Max actually stood a fighting chance against those two decks specifically, leading the metagame. Believe it or not, we actually saw this theory manifest itself in one regional top 8 finish and another regional top 32, which is generally good enough to earn an invitation to nationals, and in my personal opinion, very impressive all things considered. Since that format, Blue Eyes Chaos Max has had basically no competitive accomplishments in the TCG from what I could gather in my research, and I'd say that it's largely due to a worsening meta environment for ritual themes, especially ones like Shinobirds and Chaos Max that ideally want to go second. Necros succeeded masterfully because it could go first and just lock the opponent out of special summoning completely for easy wins, or break boards with Trishula if you lost a dice roll. Chaos Max never specialized in versatility and very much lacked potent opening plays. Your best option was basically to summon a gigantic dragon and hope it doesn't get kaiju'd. Speaking of which, I believe the kaijus themselves were a major factor in why Chaos Max never got off the runway. Chaos Max as a deck should have operated similarly to Apocalypse Towers Turbo, which we saw in 2015 take many regional top 8s, even win some, and make the quarterfinals of a YCS. The thing is, at the time that Towers was running rampant in the TCG, there were no kaijus to deal with it, and players often had to resort to gimmicky outs like number 52 Diamond Crab. I think had there been no kaijus, Chaos Max could have been a lot more successful, especially considering that offensively, it completely dwarfed Towers and was almost as difficult to kill, at least in that Zoodiac format. I think it's a bit tragic that in the Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game, sometimes a card can seemingly have everything going for it, but even the smallest factor can completely derail it from seeing success. And with that, we're at the conclusion to this Yu-Gi-Oh story. If you enjoyed the video, or more importantly, you learned something, let me know by giving the video a big thumbs up, or just commenting any of your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching as always, and stay subscribed for more videos like this in the future.